You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Manfred Zimmel, editor of Amanita Market Forecasting, and he's speaking to us from Austria. Manfred, welcome once again to the show.
Thanks, Jim, for inviting me again.
Can you perhaps again explain the complicated process that you use to put together this most informative and very accurate newsletter for us?
Yeah, it's based on a variety of different methods. It started mainly with astrology and standard methods of fundamental and technical analysis. And over the years, over 15 years, it got a lot broader. So it's now certainly the broadest approach you will find anywhere. It includes a lot of numerology, the codes being in the numbers, and a lot of conspiracy stuff, a lot of the New World Order plan, the codes, what's next, a lot of very long-term forecasts regarding war activity, diseases, very general global topics like electrosmog and things like that. So it has become much more than just a market ladder over time. It, of course, includes a lot of politics too. And yeah, this approach, this very broad approach, is most of the time very accurate now. In the past few years, especially since 2014, it has been much better than ever before, especially considering that it's much more difficult today to make forecasts than it was like 10 or 20 years ago. So because everything is totally different than it was before, everything is changing, the empirical patterns break.
And it doesn't help that we have so many governments trying to manipulate markets right now too as well, right?
No, of course not. And this is a major part of it, to foresee how the manipulation is working. What's the next step of the manipulators? What's the plan behind? I mean, this is of course much more difficult to foresee than the market forces, because markets are the aggregated decisions of usually like millions of people or systems in this case. And of course, these manipulations are quite arbitrary. Very few people. There's just actually a handful of people deciding them. We just don't know exactly what's on their mind, and they can change their mind at any time.
Can you tell us what Lucy 24 August is?
Yeah, there was a movie last year in 2014, the Lucy movie, and it contained the passport expiration date of Lucy, which was August 24th of 2015. The only similar occurrence before in a movie was in the movie Matrix 1999, where you had the 9/11 date put in as the passport expiration date of Neo. And what you can see is that the parallels are just amazing. The 24th of August was the biggest crash day in at least 4 years in the stock market, and the significance of this date has been discussed for, over almost a year now, since 2014, and it's worked really just incredibly well. So it was this huge gap just on the 24th out of basically nowhere. I mean, there was not really anything in the news that would justify a market reaction like that. So it was announced in the movie in 2014, which is kind of the planned economy or the manipulation, and it was executed, perfectly as it was stated in the movie. And my subscribers were aware of this date. They weren't long in advance how critical this date was, and it, was just a perfect call that, to my knowledge, no other forecaster on the planet could match.
Now, taking a look at the big crashes and skyward movements in the markets last week, the numbers 666 in numerology mean a lot. Now, in 2009, the S&P 500 bottomed at 666. The Shanghai Stock Exchange topped this year at 5166. 5 plus 1 is 6, or 666. And the Dow closed last week on one day at 15,666.44. 1 plus 5 is 6. Do you think all these 666 sightings have anything of significance to tell us?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it was a quadruple code in the Dow Jones. The closing low was 15,666.6 if you allow the tolerance of at least 1 unit or 2 units. So it was a very powerful quadruple code, very similar to the 2009 bear market lows. And although this time I'm not sure if it means the same, because we're still quite at the beginning of the big timeline that started on the 24th of August, which is stretching into late September. So it certainly was the initial bottom here, and it did turn the market for at least a very decent bounce, but I wouldn't be too sure that this was the final low. As usually in market regimes, you have false breaks. You first have false breaks to the upside. We had many of them, so there was just, you could see the pattern. There was like a new high in the Dow, and immediately, often on the same day, it turned down. Then it made a new false low. Then it turned up again, made this false high again, turned down. You know, it just went on like that for many months to shave the stops and to give as many false signals as possible. And this might be also part of the maneuver here to first create a lot of fear, then make a big bounce to the other direction, and, you know, all the maneuvers that are not easy to foresee.
Shemitah is coming up September 13th, followed by a blood moon towards the end of the month. Could those affect the markets?
Yeah, this is a pattern. The Saturn year, the Shemitah, is very important. We have a cycle, so in astrology you have, and also Jewish religion, you have a ruler for each year. I mean, they are not exactly the same, because in astrology the year starts in March, and in Jewish religion it starts September or October. And every 7th year is the Saturn year, and you can even go back like more than 3,000 years in the Bible, the Old Testament, where it was talked of the 7 good years and then the 7 bad years or 7 meager years. And you can track back this cycle. It's anchored by the Saturn year. So the past 7 years were the good years, which was characterized by low inflation, declining commodity prices, rising stock prices, declining interest rates. Next 7 years into 2022 are the meager years, which are characterized by just the opposite. And the end date of the Saturn year is usually in September. The past 2 instances, like in 2008 and 2001, it marked the biggest Dow crash in points up to this date. And the first one was, of course, already mentioned as a code in U.S. passport, 9/11. So the markets were closed on 9/11 for a couple of trading days and then reopened, and then the big crash happened. And then in 2008, 7 years ago, we had the Lehman crash, and the Dow actually then collapsed by 777 points, which is all the confirmation of the number 7 here. The magic 7 was already mentioned by Christine Lagarde in early 2014. It was actually the most interesting speech I think a top politician has ever given. She talked a lot about the magic of the number 7. The 7 is the number found by far most often in the Holy Bible, so it's certainly the key number here, and you see it in the 7-year cycle because we have the 7 planets, so every 7th year is the Shemitah. And it's interesting to see how the 7 is showing up so many times, also not just on the date, but like on the last day of the 7th year, the Saturn year, 1,000 the points.
What do you see happening in currencies? What's ahead for the U.S. dollar, and can the euro survive?
Yeah, I am probably now the biggest euro bull in this corner of the galaxy. What I have noted in the past years, at least in 2012, 2011 or even 2010, when the crisis started in Greece, that sentiment is terribly lopsided. I've never seen so many negative forecasts and calls for any other market. So it's hard to find. For years, actually, it has been almost impossible to find a euro bull. There are just very negative comments, and this is from a sentiment perspective, of course, the most bullish thing you can expect, and it should turn the euro higher. Already this year, it has already started to risen in the past months, and the real rally in the euro is due from 2019 on, because I interpret the Holy Bible in the way that the European Union is the beast, the 666 beast mentioned in the Holy Bible. It is the Roman Empire reloaded, and 2019 marks the beginning of the 42 months of the reign of the beast, and this will certainly confirm the strength of the euro, or the role of Europe in general. So I'm very bullish for the euro, at least for the coming years. There will be a bigger decline in 2016, and then again 2018, and a huge rally should start in about 4 years, when the US dollar should start to collapse, because finally the US empire starts to collapse. I know that the fall of the US empire has been called by many gurus for so many years. But usually fundamental calls are on average 5 or 10 years early, or even more so, but they're hardly ever totally wrong. It's just timing that is wrong. Of course, empires always do everything to remain in power, to remain in control of the situation, and it looks like the August 12th explosion in China was an attack through a nuclear bomb. I mean, certainly the proof is still missing, but China also sent nuclear experts to the site, and this has me smell the red and understand what is going on. So I've learned for years that, like, the US empire is like the wounded tiger that is most dangerous, and this seems to confirm the role of China, which is of course the rising power, at least for the time being, and then the demise of the US empire, especially because this explosion happened right on the day after China devalued the renminbi, which could be seen as an economic aggression, which was then answered with a military aggression.
We'll have more with Manfred Zimmel right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Manfred Zimmel, editor of the Amanita Market Forecasting Newsletter. What are 1-second events, and why are we likely to see any in the near future? Was that explosion something that you might describe as a 1-second event?
Yeah, the biggest 1-second event in the past year was certainly in January 2015, when a Swiss franc peg was removed out of the blue. And the timing was also interesting because it remained in effect for more than 40 months, and 40 a key number here. And as you can see, it was a very fraudulent pattern until virtually the last moment. Everybody confirmed that the Swiss National Bank will do everything to keep the fixing to the euro. Then out of the blue, when almost nobody expected it except my readers, the peg was abolished. And a similar event already happened when the peg was introduced, which killed some funds who relied on stops. And the big problem with these 1-second events is that they totally ruin stop-based strategies. We also had kind of a gap or a 1-second event actually on August 24th to a lesser degree, or in August 2015, the Chinese currency devaluation was partly a 1-second event, and they are likely to become more and more frequent because 1-second events are almost always due to manipulation or political acts. In very few cases, it might be due to something like natural disasters happening, but this is the exception. So in almost all cases, it's man-made, and it's very tricky to deal with that. One has to be prepared. One should use very small positions only. One should not rely on stops. Otherwise, the odds are very high that portfolios will get wiped out by these 1 second events. And it's possible that, 1 second, just one second event might be enough to wipe out some portfolios when they are very lopsided in their positioning. Another example, of course, was the Greek stock market, which I think opened about 20% lower after it had been closed for a month in the summer of this year. And the risk is, that the stops are triggered in perfectly the wrong moment. So stops maximize the losses instead of minimizing them. And one should be very careful now in the end times not to be caught on the wrong foot by 1 second event.
What do you see ahead for gold and silver?
Gold and silver have been bullish in the past weeks. I had a position that was hedged. So on the paper, a paper short signal was given into late July, which was reversed within 1 day of the low. There was a constellation which is Venus retrograde, which is still, amazingly, still the perfect bottom indicator. It has, with an accuracy of just a couple of days, nailed all big bear market lows in the past decades. July 2015 was also a false break in gold, at least, when gold in US dollar terms went to a new low, while in euro terms it didn't. So it was again one of these false break outs to the downside. Now we are heading somewhat higher into late 2016, but not too much. So I don't expect really much more than a good sideways consolidation. 2016 should be better than 2015, but there is the risk that in 2017 there will be a huge crash of gold and silver prices, and the real bull market won't start before 2017 then. So on a secular level, the bear market in 2011 or 12, depending on the currency, should continue into 2017.
Is global liquidity playing a role in volatile markets?
Yeah, in volatile markets, global liquidity is not as important as it is in normal markets. So what we see is that all kinds of correlations that usually are almost carved into stone fall apart. Like, for instance, around late August, even the correlation between Dow Jones and S&P 500, which is normally 99% on a daily basis, went down a lot to 80 or 90%, which is actually a huge move considering that it is almost always tied in a very small range, like 97, 98, 99%. And global liquidity still plays a role here, but not the way it used to play in a couple of years into 2013. So in the past 1 or 2 years, it has been less important than it was before. Especially in the stock market, you see that they are moving just the opposite way than the other markets, which was actually an exception for many years, but it has become the rule, especially in 2014 and 15.
Is China facing economic devastation, or will it rise to become the superpower to replace the U.S.?
I think, both of it. It has a lot of internal problems. Many of China's problems are actually the same as of the U.S. and Europe and the other developed economies, especially the demographics is very negative. So it has the peak population now around 2015, and due to a one-child policy introduced in the late 1970s, it will have a shrinking population, which is even worse than, for instance, the U.S., which is quite expanding still. And on a more short-term level, China has also, like the West, too much debt in the system. It is over-leveraged. It is, of course, not too well managed, but probably still better than many of the Western economies. And it was very difficult in the past few years for China. It saw imports crashing, but at least we should be very close to an economic bottom right now. For a long time, I've stated that the world economy should bottom out around August 2015, but this bottom should not really be followed by a full recovery as in the past, but it should more stabilize on a low level for the next recession starts. Chinese numbers are very, very bad. They don't reflect reality at all, at least not the big three, which is unemployment, inflation, and GDP growth, but just one level deeper, like power usage or imports. You see how bad the numbers look like. There was a 20-30% shrinkage in imports, which is certainly telling that China has been in a recession for quite some time now, and it's not really offset by the internal demand. Chinese exports have been doing much better, but also they have been going down a little bit in the past 1 or 2 years, if the numbers are correct. So it's a very mixed bag for China, I think. I wouldn't really favor them. My favorite in Asia or on a global level in general is India, which is doing better on almost all levels. It has negative constellation, not until 2020, so at least the coming 5 or 7 years, it should be a much better spot to be. I like India especially because of the very strong demographic structure. There are just a few nations who have a similar number of young persons, and this is something that is very solid behind India. And India is also quite close compared to China, which is an advantage in bad times. The financial system in India is certainly much more regulated than in the rest of the world. So it has the odds of surviving even very big trouble. But of course, there is no guarantee, and we will see. It's just a relative statement I make here on China and India. The big message is that we are seeing the biggest crisis in the history of mankind that is spreading into the 2030s, although most of it should be over by 2023.
Manfred, how can people subscribe to your newsletter to find out more about your financial theories, financial predictions?
Yeah, the website is www.amanita.at. That's AMANITA, amanita.at, so it's not .com. And there you will find a lot in the free area, also the newsletter discussing that, and articles, and you can subscribe to the market letter, which is admittedly quite expensive, and I don't really want to attract very engaged subscribers. I mean, my approach, it's certainly in the first month not easy to understand. It's much more than just a market letter. I also want to teach something. I want to provide explanations why I'm making calls like that. So it's also a creative adventure, I think, being part of my newsletter, either the free newsletter or the premium market letter. And the difference is, of course, that the market letter is focusing on financial market forecasts with a portfolio and different things like that.
Manfred, thank you very much for taking time out of your vacation to speak to us from Vienna.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Manfred Zimmel, editor of the Amanita Market Forecasting newsletter. You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Comments about the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.